When you're driving down a Texas highway and you see an 18-wheeler, you probably just see a massive truck. But what happens if that truck is in an accident? Well, it's not just a bigger fender bender. It's actually the start of a journey into a legal world that is way more complex than you'd ever imagine. So, let's unpack what's really going on here.
Just look at this. It lays it all out. A regular car crash is on one side, it's pretty straightforward. But an accident with a commercial truck? Wow, that is a whole different ballgame. You're suddenly dealing with a tangled web of both federal and state laws, a whole lineup of people who could be at fault, and crucial evidence that can, and I mean literally, vanish into thin air.
I like to think of it like peeling an onion. The huge size and weight of the truck? Yeah, that's just the first, most obvious layer, the papery skin on the outside. But once you start peeling it back, you find all these other layers of regulations, corporate structures, and evidence that make these cases incredibly complicated.
And if you're the person who's been injured in one of these crashes, trying to find your way through this, it's a monumental challenge. It really is a legal labyrinth, and every single turn presents a new, tricky obstacle. Let's start with the first one. Here's where things start getting really interesting. See, the car you drive mostly just follows Texas traffic laws. But a commercial truck? It's operating under two totally different, overlapping sets of rules at the same time. And that's the first huge complication.
The first rulebook comes from the federal government. This agency, the FMCSA, sets the safety rules for the entire country. So, think about that for a second. An accident that happens on a local road in Texas is also being judged by safety regulations that were written in Washington, D.C.
And these rules go deep. We're talking about everything. There are strict limits on how many hours a driver can be on the road, all to prevent them from getting dangerously tired. There are tough drug testing rules, super detailed maintenance logs for the truck, and even specific regulations for how the cargo has to be tied down. A single violation in any of these areas can become the key piece of the puzzle.
And just when you think you've got a handle on the federal side, bam, Texas throws its own rule book right on top. On top of all those national regulations, Texas has its own transportation code. A lot of times, these laws just mirror the federal ones, but sometimes they add even more requirements, creating this incredibly dense web of rules that a trucking company has to follow perfectly. Okay, so we've got a confusing mess of rules. Let's peel back that next layer of the onion, figuring out who is actually responsible. Because believe me, it is almost never as simple as just blaming the person sitting behind the wheel. It's the natural question, right? You see the driver, you see the truck, so it's got to be their fault. Simple. Well, the law looks much, much deeper than that.
And the answer is not even close. Just look at this potential lineup. The driver is on the list, of course, but so is the trucking company that hired them. The business that loaded the cargo could be at fault if it wasn't secured right. The mechanic who worked on the brakes, the company that made a faulty part, even the logistics broker who arranged the shipment. They all have a legal duty to make sure that truck is safe. And it all boils down to this one critical legal concept: negligence. To have a case, you have to prove that one of those parties on that long list failed to be reasonably careful, and that their failure is what directly caused the crash and the injuries. That's the foundation of the entire claim.
Which brings us to our next, and maybe most urgent layer, the evidence. Proving negligence takes hard facts, and in a truck accident, the most important facts have a very, very short shelf life. This is where so many cases are won or lost before they even really begin. It's an absolute race against the clock. We're not just talking about photos from the scene here. We're talking about a whole different class of evidence. Big rigs have a black box that records speed and braking data. They have electronic logs that track every single minute a driver is working. And back at the office, the company has files on the driver's history and the truck's entire repair record. This is the stuff that tells the real story. And here's why it's a race. Look at this clock ticking. That black box data, maybe the most important piece of the puzzle, can be legally recorded over and erased in just a matter of days. Poof, gone. Corporate records get harder to get your hands on after a few weeks. That 2-year deadline to file a lawsuit seems like a long time, but the evidence you need to win that lawsuit can disappear in the first week. All right, so let's say you've won the race for evidence and you're building a case. What does justice actually look like for a victim? Let's talk about what you can be compensated for and the specific Texas rules you absolutely have to follow. Okay, so in the legal world, compensation is called damages, and it's split into two buckets. On one side, you have
economic damages. This is all the stuff with a clear price tag: your medical bills, lost wages, the cost to fix your car. But then there's the other side, non-economic damages. This is for the human cost, the physical pain, the emotional trauma, the way the injury impacts your life.
Now, this is a huge deal in Texas. You have to understand this rule. It's called proportionate responsibility. It basically means that if you're found to be even a little bit at fault, your compensation gets reduced by that percentage. So if you're 10% at fault, you only get 90% of the money. But here's the really harsh part. If a jury decides you are 51% or more to blame, you get zero. Nothing. Not a dime. It's a tough, tough standard.
And finally, there is the hardest deadline of all. 2. In Texas, you generally have just 2 years from the date of the accident to file a lawsuit. That's it. If you miss that deadline by even 1 day, your right to seek justice is gone forever, no matter how strong your case might be.
So when you put all the pieces together, the tangled mess of laws, the long list of potential defendants, that ticking clock on evidence, and the strict Texas rules, it becomes crystal clear. This is not just a bigger car wreck. It's a completely different animal, and navigating that labyrinth really does require a specialized guide.
So I'll leave you with this thought. The next time you're driving down the highway and one of those big rigs rumbles past you, maybe you'll see it a little differently. You'll still see the truck and the driver, of course, but maybe now you'll also see that invisible, complex machine of law, commerce, and risk that's rolling right alongside you.